Hello and welcome to the From Way Downtown Pacers podcast. I am IndyStar Pacers editor Nat Newell, here, of course, with Dustin Dopirak, our Pacers insider. This is either the last podcast of the 2023-2024 season or the first podcast of the 2024-25 season. So Dustin was at the exit interviews both after Game 4 and then again today with several key figures in the Pacers, and we'll get into all of that. But we'll start with a quick look, semi-quick at least, look back at the Celtics series and the season as a whole. I mean, obviously, you had the Pacers had 3 games they easily could have won.
Sure.
I don't think there's any disputing that. Based on, I believe, the ESPN win probability, it was 91%, 90%, and 95% in 3 of those games, and that works out to a 0.45 chance that they lose all 3, and yet they did. Maybe that's a flaw in win probability, or maybe they were just incredibly bad down the stretch. To me, I mean, obviously that's disappointing, but I mean, they had to win on the last day of the regular season to not be in the play-in.
Sure.
I think everyone said, just be the 6th seed or better in this. Even if you went in the play-in and made a 7-game playoff series, that was a win this year. They exceeded that. Yes, the Bucks were hurt. Yes, the Knicks were hurt. But also, they beat the Bucks and the Knicks in the regular season. Different teams. It's not a perfect comparison. We've gone through this before. But don't tell me that the Pacers were not. The Pacers have an argument that they were better than the Bucks and the Knicks head-to-head this year, and it's a pretty good argument. You want to tell me they weren't? I'm not going to fight with you about it. But but that's there too. They make the conference finals. To me, this just seems like the ending was a little painful, but come on, this is everything the Pacers and their fans should have wanted out of this season.
Sure. No, I mean, it's definitely one of those, multiple things can be true at the same time.
Yes.
It's that, you can still absolutely believe that this team achieved far more than it could have expected to. I mean, I think we were, we were obviously in exit interviews today, and both Rick Carlisle and Chad Buchanan said they were really thinking of, what's it going to take? And at the beginning of the season, they were like, okay, we expect to be a playoff team this year. What is it going to take to be in the Eastern Conference Finals within 3 years? And they were there. And again, to your point, like obviously you have to, Maxine has thoughts, note the caveats of, they did face some teams that were dealing with injury problems. But, Milwaukee, I think that Milwaukee without Giannis is a playoff team. It's not a championship caliber team, but it's a playoff team. A team that has Damian Lillard, a high-functioning version of Chris Middleton, Bobby Portis, Brook Lopez, gets you in the playoffs. So like that team's enough to get you in. That's a challenging group they beat. Beat them 4 out of 6. That's something. The Knicks, obviously, the way that they were fighting and battling, they were a tough out. I mean, even without OG Anunoby, without Julius Randle, Jalen Brunson was playing some of the best basketball of anybody in the NBA in the playoffs. That's not an easy out. That's still a tough game, especially when you go beat them at the Garden in Game 7. You've achieved something. And so you could say, all right, well, you run this whole season back, simulate it a different way, and maybe they don't even get in the playoffs. Maybe, things can go a whole different way. Sure, they could. They absolutely could.
Maybe Haliburton doesn't get hurt, and they're the 2 seed in the East. I mean,
sure. If Haliburton doesn't get hurt, they lost some games they had no business losing. If you imagine them even getting a couple of those, they're a higher seeded team. So, it could go a whole bunch of different ways. It's clearly an achievement. They clearly, the most important thing I thought as far as just what they had to get out of it is this group had to experience this. They had to find out who they are in a playoff setting and what it requires to win in a playoff setting. So to me, just getting in there, everything after that was gravy. Any winning they did was gravy. They just had to learn what postseason basketball felt like. So even after when they came in there and they got punched in the mouth in Game 1, just reacting to that. Game 1 against the Bucks, just reacting to that was, like that was the biggest piece you needed to achieve after this year. So anything else after that, you were golden, and they got a lot of learning opportunities, a lot of scenarios to get better. And then to look and say, look, we really achieved something. We really got to the point where the only team that beat them was a team that was 14 games better than everybody in the East all year. So, they got a lot to be proud of. And on the flip side of that, you can say legitimately without holding back that there were real mistakes made in, late game execution. I mean, I think it can easily both be the case that Rick Carlisle is a great fit for this team from a personality standpoint, from a giving his players freedom standpoint, that, maybe they would not be as far if not for him, that he's just really fit this group at the right time in his career, at the right time in their career. He's rejuvenated. He's given them a lot of faith and confidence that they need on a big picture level, and still say in those kind of split second, like hindsight's 2020 looking back at it, coach decisions, that he made the wrong ones. Ultimately the wrong ones. I don't think any of them were crazy. I don't think that any of them required you to be an idiot to make them. But he ended up being wrong, and obviously not calling a timeout, I see the justification for, keeping the timeout in your pocket and say, put that in your hands of your ball handler. And you say, if you're in trouble, you call it. I'm not going to do it for you. You make a decision whether you think you need out of this. If you don't, make the pass yourself.
Yeah, you're talking about
the Nembhard pass that gets game one
against the Celtics when with 8.5 seconds left or whatever it was.
Right, and Nembhard passes it off of Siakam's hand, and
Nembhard's inbounding the ball. I 100% think Carlisle didn't call the timeout because he wanted Nembhard to have the timeout to call if he couldn't inbound the ball. And then Rick Carlisle is not going to tell the media that, because that's throwing his guy under the bus, and that's what you want out of your coach. So
yeah, exactly. And it's a 24-year-old point guard who had, 24-year-old point guard who's kind of your backup point guard, but also your shooting guard, but also defending some of your best players who you're asking a whole lot out of, and was brilliant in the last two games of the series with Tyrese Haliburton. And he really rode the waves with Nembhard this entire series, this entire playoffs. Nembhard's had some tough games, but then he had some brilliant games. And at no point in that did Rick pull the rug out from underneath him. And I think there's something to be said for that, because, there was a lot of discussion about where was TJ McConnell at the end of, I think it was game two against the Knicks. Why isn't he playing? Why are you still leaving Nembhard out there when Jalen Brunson is cooking him? Which I get. And they obviously decided to move Nesmith on him after that. But in the same way, there is something to be said for the faith that he puts in these guys. That is some of the important part of this formula that makes the whole thing work. So I get where he was coming from there. Another situation where it's putting it in your hands of your players. He obviously instructed to foul if they could. Before the Jaylen Brown three, Pascal Siakam didn't get there fast enough and didn't feel like he could do it. And so, thought there was a situation where he put him on the line for three, give him a 3-pointer, give him 3 points that he wasn't going to get otherwise, or, risk the opportunity of a 4-point play. So
no one talks about it. It was an incredible shot that
Brown made,
too. I mean,
it was an incredible shot. He probably, the one probably other mistake he makes is he gets up there, and because he's hesitant, he doesn't get his hands up to contest. I mean, that's a secondary issue. Now that's hard, from a physiological standpoint of when you're thinking about reaching in and going from your hands being in that position to your hands being above your head, and straight up so that you're not fouling. Not an easy thing to do, but still, it was kind of indecisive of I'm supposed to foul, but I don't think I can do it, and I've got to contest. So he didn't commit to either, and I think that obviously burned him. But all the same.
You hear a lot of the players say it's hard to foul and not when they're not shooting. Yeah. Way harder than I think people realize in the course of the game. You've heard several analysts who are
and not only that, they give you a lot in the NBA too. Where in college, it's pretty set and delineated whether you're in the act of shooting or not. And they tend to err on the side of, they don't give you a lot of continuation. They don't give you the gather step, where you get all of these things in the NBA to turn something into an and one that you don't get in college basketball. And so, and it's striking for me, basically, how early in a play someone can get fouled and then they get the and one. And, where I've been covering college as long as I did. I'm still sometimes I'm he gets that? He really does? And they do. And so it's just for all of those reasons, you're you are kind of on your guard there, because there's so many different ways that somebody could burn you, and turn, what in college is not a shooting foul into a shooting foul. Obviously, these guys have been playing in the NBA for years, most of them. So it's not, I'm not suggesting they're coming in with the same knowledge that I am, but all the same, you kind of got to remember just how many different ways you can get burned there. So yeah, I mean that was harder than it sounded. But again, it comes back to just putting faith in the guys. I mean, I think you could call it the flip side of it in Game 2 when Haliburton goes out, him deciding to go towards the end of his bench. I mean, I think that was a tactical retreat, and I understand why it happened. I think there was some value to it in terms of resting some guys, saying, "Hey, we're not catching up here. We have to gather ourselves and get a better effort in Game 3." And they had a better effort in Game 3. And what else did he supposedly screw up in Game 3? I'm trying to remember.
Well, I would also add
the fast break.
The only statistical analysis of fouling up 3 I found is that it's basically 50-50. I'd love to find more and see more. But again, I think it's one of those things that people remember it when it goes wrong. And the math is pretty ambivalent about it. I agree that was it a great look? You're up 17 and he pulls the guys. I get it. They get it down to 12. Could you have made a run? Yeah, you could. But if you want to criticize him for that, I'm fine. Again, you kind of got the sense, like you said, that he just wanted to move on to the next game. And then the other one was the timeout when Nebhart went 1-on-4. Not calling timeout when Nebhart went 1-on-4 in Game 3, I believe, at the end. Yes. And it was a turnover, Drew Holiday. I don't know. I mean, could Carlisle have all of a sudden jumped up and down and yelled timeout, timeout, timeout from the sideline? Maybe he could have, and that maybe he should have. Again, I think it's one of those things where anything he says is criticizing Nebhart, and he doesn't want to do that. I don't.
Right.
So to me, the big picture here is there's a lot of these situations where you say, did he make the right call? And in any individual one, you can say, I'm okay with it. To have so many, that's a little bit more of a red flag. But he's Rick Carlisle. I mean, he's been a super successful coach. You don't have questions about his abilities to be an NBA coach, I suppose.
Right.
Getting older, maybe you need to be. But that doesn't seem like what's going on here. So, while I get the frustration, I just think this was a series of things that, tough decisions that maybe he didn't make the right one, but it was still, when you're talking about a 45-55 decision, even when you make the right one, it can go wrong on you pretty easily. So
sure, no, absolutely. I mean, I think, and some of it's just split second stuff of you've got to be there for this. I mean, I think like when you plot it all the way out, I mean, the issue for me on the 1-on-4 break, it becomes a 4-on-4 break about a step later. I mean, like it should be noted, like there's 3 guys that are about a step short of half court when you keep seeing the first picture of Nembhard being down and 4 other Celtics being down. Like there are 3 other guys that are about to pass the timeline, and so they become part of the play there. So by that point, it's practically like you have a 4-on-4. But one issue is one guy who's not part of that 4 is Pascal Siakam, because he'd gotten tripped up. Basically Turner and Siakam both went for the block, and they managed to keep Tatum away from a finish. It was really good defensive play, but Siakam kind of stumbles there. I don't know if he came down on Turner's feet or what, whenever he gets tied up, tripped up, whatever. So he is behind on the play, and so that's your best guy in terms of being able to create a shot out of nothing, is not in the play. And so, 4-on-4 in that scenario, you probably should call a timeout, but it's one of those things where you have about a half a second to make that choice, see that it's not going right.
You also have a chance to make a play there. If someone gets open, 1-on-4, you're not going to make a play necessarily, but you have it, you're letting the players make the decision rather than overcoaching everything. And there's something to be said for that. I mean, I guess I'd rather my coach make that mistake than the other way around. So,
yeah, big picture, you would, every once in a while he's got to take the reins, and like my end of the day analysis is he should have, far as what was the, real capacity to pull that off, like how much you're certainly talking about something that's much easier said than done. But certainly the right call there at that point is to say, this is not a viable situation to get a bucket. Like you need to score. You don't have the capacity for it right now. You're as good as Andrew Nembhard of a game as he was having. He's driving into Drew Holiday. And the only move he's got right now is driving into Drew Holiday, and that is stepping into a bee's nest. I mean, like, you are, like, you're playing right into his hands. Like, I didn't realize until, we spent a lot of time around Eric Name during this. Eric is the athletics beat writer for the Bucks, and he was sort of on the Pacers beat, and he was like, no, that's the Drew. He's like, that's what Drew Holiday does. From seeing him his time with the Bucks, he's like, that is his move. Is he lets you start the contact and he does this kind of like backward swipe, and that is patented. So basically, Nembhard stepped right into the Drew Holiday trap. For a pretty spectacular steal, and Holiday was just tremendous this entire series. It was not easy to keep him off the MVP ballot, honestly, between him, Brown, and Tatum was kind of a coin flip, but Holiday had some big moments in that series, and that was one of them. But yeah, I think you were better off. Like, the move is to call the timeout, but I get why it didn't happen.
Let's move on. Sort of a combination of looking back and looking ahead with Tyrese Haliburton's injury the last two games. Nembhard was fabulous. Nembhard was awful the first 3 games without Haliburton this season. I mean, really dreadful. And then after that, he was basically a really, really good NBA starting point guard when Haliburton missed the rest of the games. Took it even up another notch the last 2. But just fill us in on what Haliburton said today at the exit interviews about his injury situation with the hamstring. Celtics.
Yeah, he gave us the entire play-by-play. And so that's always fun when talking about Tyrese, when you get him, when he is willing to just lay it all out there, because he is exquisite detail. He's got great recall, absurd intelligence. So it's like you get the whole story and you don't even have to push, and he just said, yeah, basically what happened was, he said it happened in the corner when he was in an ISO situation with Al Horford. So it was in the second quarter, like Rick Carlisle said, there's a play that everybody keeps focusing on. He said, that's when you see how hurt I am. He says, I was already hurt. But, when you see me try to backpedal and try to do it, that's when, I'm already injured at that point. But that's when you can tell, that's when I can really tell that this is going to be a problem. And they said he basically went in a half, had it looked at, treated it, wrapped it up. He also got a chest x-ray to see if he had any problem, because he got knocked in the back and they were concerned about his heart for a minute. And so he came out and, he knew when he came out, he was done. Said the entire next day he couldn't really walk, but he woke up, the morning of game 3, had an MRI, said he called his agents up and said, hey, I don't care what you guys tell me, I'm playing. Basically, I don't care what you say, I'm going to try to play. And the agents apparently, I don't know if the agents flagged this or somebody else did, but basically there was he said he called it an organization-wide meeting that included his agents, front office, everybody, and they basically told him, no, Ty, you're not. And, he said basically it was taken out of his hands. He says, they kind of saved me from myself there, and I have to understand that and respect that, because I know the long-term implications. Interestingly enough, said it's not a re-aggravation, said it's actually a separate injury of the same hamstring. So I think your hamstring is like a collection of tendons. So basically, like, the one that was strained or the part that was strained in January is not the same as the part that was strained this time, even though it's the same, even though it's the same leg, it's the same general area. He said it's a different injury. It's new. So he said, I know how much of an issue it was from before, so I know why everybody was telling me to stop. And so, obviously just they basically told him, like, you're not going, and you don't have a choice. Like, you're not going to try to battle this. You're not going to go warm up and make a decision. This could be a long-term problem for you if you make the wrong call here. So you're not doing it. So I thought that was all interesting. He says he does feel like he's going to be able to be back and healthy, in time for the Olympics. I mean, that's an important calculation. I mean, I think, I've said this before. I mean, I would not, considering how big of a deal this one's going to be, with who's a part of it, how important I think it is really for, with it being probably LeBron's last ride, Curry's last ride, Durant's last ride, it's important they win this one. And so if you get a chance to be a part of this, you're going to want to be wholly into it, and you're going to remember it for the rest of your life. And if you skip it, you remember it for the rest of your life, and regret it. And so, Haliburton seems to be totally bought in on it. Like, he hasn't even thought twice. And he expects to be healthy by the time he goes to camp, which is about 6 weeks. Right around the beginning of July. They're going to have a showcase game July 10th. So, feels like he'll be pretty good, going into that point. So, but that's where he feels like he stands. Sounds like it's ultimately not as bad as the first one, but ultimately he also said, the difference is I get to rest. I don't have to go out and try to play games every time. I'm not shooting at this, soon target date. I got some time to just rest up, and that's a big piece of it.
The other, or one of the other interesting things to come out of the exit interviews from today, based on your reporting, was Chad Buchanan, the general manager, said they're interested in running it back this fall. I mean, they have to re-sign Pascal Siakam, which we will get into more. But I mean, and we're also, to me, the other thing that's interesting is sort of what they need is Benedict Mathurin to take another step forward. That's sort of the piece they need. But fill us in on what Chad Buchanan said and what your thoughts are when you heard him say that running it back is the plan.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't lead with it. Basically, I think, we kind of had to prod him on that a couple ways. Tony East prodded him on that as well. And, it was a situation where he basically said, it's a scenario we're considering. He didn't come in and say, look, we're running it back. We're not trying to get anybody, we're trying to get this exact team, and that's all we're thinking about. But he did say, that would be a situation we're comfortable with. If that's how it goes, we're okay with that. We're going to look aggressively. We're going to consider all options, people we could acquire, see if there's somebody who's a good fit, see if it's somebody we need, something we think that helps. But if it's a scenario where we just end up with the same guys, we're comfortable with that. That's not a thing that's going to bother us. We feel like there's a lot of room for growth. When it comes to that, I mean, I asked earlier because he mentioned needing to get better on defense, and I said, do you feel like you need a piece? Is there a piece defensively you feel like you need to be a better defensive team? And he said, we'll look for that to see if it's there. He says, but on the flip side, I think there's a lot of room for growth for the guys that we have to become better defenders and therefore become a better defensive team. And so, what that's kind of saying is basically they do feel like if, Andrew Nembhard and Aaron Nesmith are their top two perimeter guys, that's viable. And as they get better, that they can see them growing into somebody they can really trust in those scenarios. And they've trusted them in big situations before, but, you've seen them in moments where they haven't won those battles. And, but they do grow from those. They do learn from those. And so I think they believe that they can turn into, guys that can be at or close to all defense capacity, somewhere in that range. It doesn't sound like they don't feel like they've got enough shot blocking. It doesn't feel like they don't feel like they have enough rebounding, or at least guys that can become the players they need to become to be that. So again, they're going to be on the lookout. They're going to consider things that come available, trades that pop around, look at free agents and stuff like that. But they don't, Kevin Pritchard, I think, said, last winter, basically, I think the word he used around the end of the season was that he was itching to make a big deal. And now they've made the big deal. They went out and they got Pascal Siakam. That was the big deal they had to make to go get a second all-star caliber player. And obviously, again, that's, if they re-sign him, they're taking up 2 max slots. And that's 60% of your cap right there on 2 guys. And so you're already paying. And on top of that, you've got, you owe Miles Turner $20 million this year. So that's probably in the 15-something% range, somewhere in that vicinity at this point. Maybe a touch less than that, but somewhere around there. So, that's a good bit of money you're taking up with 3 guys. It sort of makes sense to not be thinking of a third max slot guy, right now. So they're going to have their eye on it. They're going to look around, but I mean, don't be shocked if you don't see a big personnel move from this group this offseason.
And I am not a salary cap expert. You are not a salary cap expert. Eyeballing it with the Tyrese Haliburton extension, assuming they bring back Siakam. The Athletic is reporting that the Pacers will make a max offer to Siakam, which is $42-ish million a year for 5 years. Yes. And again, they can mix some things around. They're going to be pretty much at the first apron, below it, but at it. With the pieces they've got. So there's just not a lot of, you can do some things. Is Jalen Smith going to be back? I think he has a player option. He may not be.
Yes. Yes.
I don't think they're not going to I wouldn't think they're bringing McDermott back at anything short of the veteran minimum. We'll get into Obi Toppin's contract in a minute, but they don't have the money to do a ton of things. But one thing they did say today, again, I think Rick Carlisle said the number one priority is to recruit Pascal Siakam and bring him back.
Yep.
That's important for a lot of reasons, but what were your thoughts when you heard Carlisle say that? We'll get into all of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it is. I always do find it interesting when they decide to make the subtext text, if you will. I mean, I think that was obvious from the beginning, but it's just like the little steps they take to say, we can say this on the record now, like when they come to that conclusion. I don't think anybody was under any illusions that they weren't going to try to go all out to get him. I did ask Chad Buchanan directly. I even said, I don't think you'll answer this, but let me ask, are you going to offer him a max deal? And Chad was like, I can't talk about that. But the fact that like Rick said that unprompted, basically, it was in response to a general question about their season, what they learned and everything like that, where they go to build from it. And, that's what he said was the first thing we got to do is go recruit and sign, Pascal Siakam. And so, the fact that it's like, okay, like now is the time to say it. And I think Rick in particular has a very keen sense of when he wants to do that. Whereas even, both of the management guys take or the main sort of face of the front office guys, Kevin Pritchard and Chad Buchanan, take very different steps to that. And I think that's why we see more of Chad now, is that Kevin is willing to, and we miss Kevin for this reason, Kevin is willing to pontificate.
He's willing to tell you the truth way more than he should.
Yes, from time to time. Don't listen to this, Kevin. You don't. We need more truth from you. Come on, man. We miss you. But Kevin will just talk and just sort of just work it through in his head and let you hear his inner monologue. Where Chad will not. Chad is very sharp on having a predetermined line that he is going to stick with, and in terms of what he wants out there. But Rick is interesting because every once in a while he makes a very strategic decision to be a little bit provocative, and you can tell he has plotted it out and decided when it's going to be before he does it. And this was one of those that he obviously came into this press conference saying, I want to put out there that we want Pascal, period, end of story. And so, he made that point and said, this is the guy we need. And he says, obviously he's had a good experience. He's happy with what's gone down, but this is when we have to prove and be very explicit about saying, we like you, we want you here. And so again, just thought that was notable. Not that you didn't know it already, not that you couldn't read between the tea leaves for everything else he was saying, for everything else Siakam has been saying since he was acquired. But it was just interesting always to see when, why, and how, somebody like Rick decides to make the subtext text. And so I thought that was just interesting today of leading with it, jumping into it, not waiting for us to ask about it, and wanting to say that up front.
You don't trade 3 first-round picks unless you are pretty sure the guy's going to re-sign with you. I think the other thing that's interesting is, and again, obviously not reporting anything here, I'm just looking at a list of the available free agents. The only other player that I think is on Siakam's level that could be a free agent is Paul George. He's got a player option. It seems like he's going to be a free agent. And there's been a little bit of buzz about George coming back. I think Siakam, they need a power forward more than they need a small forward if such things still exist. But Paul George would be an interesting choice for the Pacers as well and could match.
Right.
Philadelphia, to me the biggest concern is that the 76ers start whispering in Pascal Siakam's ear and tell him something that makes him think that they're a better choice than the Pacers. Sure. Certainly, Embiid is a great player, and you'd love to play with him. At the same time, he takes up a lot of space inside. He gets hurt a lot. I don't know where that goes. The other names on the list that I have are Miles Bridges, who obviously has a domestic violence issue in his past. DeMar DeRozan, who's actually an interesting piece, although if you're losing Siakam, I don't know he's a great fit. Age-wise, he's also a great fit. James Harden makes no sense.
None.
Not sure Malik Monk makes a lot of sense. Klay Thompson is mildly interesting if he has anything left. OG Anunoby is probably the next one after Paul George. He's also got a player option. It seems like he'll exercise it, but everybody seems to think he'll re-sign with the Knicks. Again, you hear those names, it really seems like it's sort of they really need to re-sign Pascal Siakam.
Yeah, I just don't see he's got the biggest reason to sign.
Yeah.
Like I just don't see any of those others. I mean, I could see Paul George being interested in Indiana. I mean, obviously from a kind of big brother, little brother type of way, Paul George and Haliburton have a good relationship. Obviously, I think you saw that on when Haliburton went on Paul George's podcast, and Haliburton made a point of saying, that from the time that Haliburton got in the league, Paul George was texting him, has tried to be in good with him. And you can imagine a scenario just of those two playing basketball together, but I just don't see Paul George deciding to come back to Indianapolis.
It seems it would be a little weird. It would also, after you weren't here or you weren't on the Pacers beat when the whole he doesn't want to play power forward after they set the whole team up for him to play power forward. I doubt that's an issue, but it would be odd to have him come back and playing a lot of power forward, at this time. So
yeah, the other thing that he said was just basically like that. I mean, the one thing I was present for was during All-Star weekend. I'm saying like they should only have this in warm weather cities, and because I think he went to Cabo like right before he came up.
He had 2 days that he could go before he had to be in Indianapolis, and he went somewhere warm. Which
exactly.
Hey, I would too. I would.
Same, and I mean I get it. I mean, like if you had all the money in the world to just do that, sure. I mean, I thought All-Star Weekend was fun, but I get it. But yeah, I mean, I just don't. I mean, he's an LA guy. I just can't see. I mean, I could see him leaving the Clippers. I mean, that's not crazy to me, but I just can't see him going back to a small market and saying, I'm just going to be all about the basketball. Like, I think he has a sense of, that he has some media capacity, that he has some ability to, have a lot of different ventures going on that would not necessarily be well served by him being in Indiana. Obviously, you can create a media mega empire out of Indianapolis because Pat McAfee's doing it. But do I think that's going to make sense for him? I mean, probably not. Certainly he could stay living in LA in the off seasons and stuff like that and do all his podcasts from there. But I just don't see it. It just doesn't make sense for him to me, as far as I could tell. I mean, I guess it's a non-zero chance, again, just because of the relationship with Haliburton and just because everybody wants to play with Haliburton because he's going to pass you the ball. And that's a little different than playing with James Harden. So
Paul George makes sense in Philadelphia, although the injury, he's gotten hurt, missed some games lately. He's getting older. That would be the only concern with Embiid. Right. But in a lot of ways, that's what makes the most sense. But again, you gotta be aware of everything that's out there. Yeah. And Siakam would not answer the question when he was asked about it, what's next, understandably. But he was very favorable in his comments about playing for the Pacers this year.
It would make you very surprised to hear all the things that he said and then him go a different direction. I mean, like, you have to leave open that there's a non-zero. I mean, I think if he doesn't go, like, if he goes somewhere else, I mean, I think basically what he said, like, you're going to read that as saying, look, there was nothing you could have done. It's not me. It's not you. It's me.
And the Pacers can offer him an extra year and an extra whatever that amounts to, $50 million. That's certainly not nothing. To me, the only reason he's leaving is because the Pacers don't offer him a max or a close to, at least, or a close to it, or whatever the final number is.
The only other scenario I think is that if he looks at another situation and says, I can win a championship there and do it fast.
Right.
I don't know if the only, jumping out at you as the possibility for that is Philadelphia. Because I like, if you're willing to make the case that, look, like, we know, I mean, they've got to figure out what they're going to do, because obviously they have Embiid on a supermax. Maxey is ending his restricted free agency, and you got to presume that they've got to give him the max to keep him. And you have to presume that they want to, because I mean, that kid was tremendous this year. So, like, I mean, the only way that you're looking at it is they're saying, okay, we're going to go after you three guys. We're going to go deep into the luxury, and maybe approach the second apron, but we're going all out, and we think you're the last piece to this. Like Maxey, Embiid, and Siakam for the win.
And then Siakam would have to buy all of that as a better, he'd have to believe everything you're saying and think it was a better choice than the Pacers to leave a fifth year and all that money on the table.
Right. Exactly. So it might force you to take a little bit less money. Even they might not be able to offer it to you. So, that's the only, again, I'm 85-90 that he stays, but that 10% of doubt based on what he said was based on him talking about how hard it is to get back. Like when he talked about that, it was like, I think it was mostly just, I've been in this league for a long time. I know what it means. I've won a title and then not gotten back to there. So like, you don't start where you finished a previous season. Like you think about making the next step, but you're not taking a step from where you finished. It's not like you enter the season, you're an Eastern Conference finalist, so it's just taking that another step and you're in the NBA Finals. You have to do all that it takes to get back there, knowing it's going to be a different season, knowing it's going to be different dynamics for every other team in the league, and then get the extra step you need to take. It is a much bigger charge than it sounds like if you just say the next step. And so I think that was his way of just being a veteran. But if I was like, okay, look back, explain why this happened. If he leaves, I would point to that and say he knows what it would take for this group to get there. And it's like he sees it as being them having been luckier to get where they were and needing to go further to be really an established contender than they are.
And I think, to me, the most interesting thing about the Pacers right now is that you say what you say to see, you have to kind of quote unquote prove to Siakam that you're ready to go for a title. At the same time, you're saying we could easily run it back. But I think those jibe because you have Benedict Mathurin. What is this team's biggest need? To me, it is that number 3 scorer or whatever number you end up having this person be. And that could be Mathurin. I mean, I wish he was a little bigger, but that's really it. I'm not saying Mathurin's going to get there, but I don't think there's any doubt that he has the talent to get to develop into the piece that this team needs to take the next step. And again, you said he had a really interesting exit interview. Not to
sure did.
One of the least interesting things he said was he bonded with his teammates by baking for them, and that's like the least interesting thing he said. So take us through what Mathurin's exit interview was like today.
Yeah, he's also calling me out. So I mean, he's totally motivated by something I apparently tweeted this year, or maybe not. I don't know, but he's calling me out for something. So basically, if he turns into an all-star next year, it was me. It was totally me.
Yeah, take full credit for it. Exactly.
I'm taking full credit because of me. He is going to be an all-star. No. I mean, I think there was the functionally important thing was him saying that what he really learned and where he really progressed is in being part of a system, and as opposed to, he said, I've always kind of been wherever I've been the guy, and the ball has always been my hands, and it's always been about getting me points, and I had to get used to being part of a situation where it's not all about me, and I have to fit in what everybody else is doing, and including pass the ball and trust it'll come back to you. That trust your teammates to know that they do think you're good and they want you to be a part of this, but this is not going to be a team on which one guy has the ball all the time and takes 25 shots, all the time. And, especially when Mathurin's out there with Haliburton or out there with Siakam, none of those, if they're all 3 out there together, none of them are going to get super high totals because it's going to be moving around and finding the right guy. And then Mathurin also has to get used to, being selfish isn't probably the fair term, but being less sort of self-oriented in terms of I got to go get my buckets, and knowing that you have to play faster, you have to make decisions faster, and that's one thing that Carlisle mentioned is having to make quick decisions. Going to just quick shoot the ball when you're found, like Tyrese has just said, just as a simple critique. He likes to dribble. That was just Haliburton's way of thinking, is Mathurin is this one-on-one ISO type player who likes to be in scenarios where he can cross somebody up a little bit. He can attack a little bit, and kind of set up a defender and, go at him that way. And rather than do that, he's got to either shoot, drive, or move the basket. basketball and do that and make that decision in quick succession, so that the ball is moving, so they're playing as fast and making themselves as a team as they can, rather than looking at what's best for Benedict Mathurin. It's kind of just a big key here for them, something he felt like he really learned. I mean, obviously he learned the importance, had it continually, hit into his brain, the importance of defense. And, they believe physically he has every capacity to be a great defender. Obviously, there have been some moments where you've really seen that come out, and some other moments where, he gets lost or he gets turned around on a screen, or he doesn't rotate fast enough, or he doesn't get back fast enough, or something like that. And it is maintaining the focus and keeping it, not just, this is my opportunity to take a guy who's trying to, ISO me, and I'm not going to let him score on me because, I'm just not going to do that. But, making sure you're in the right place off the ball, making sure that you're caring about being where you're supposed to be, being on your marker, like wherever it is, like on the tape, and rotating correctly and that kind of thing. And he's still getting used to the finer details of all that. And he's noticing just how important they are. And then that's another thing he said he really saw in the course of the playoffs, is just how critical those little details are, that if you get those wrong, it's a problem. So, I mean, obviously he's been saying that this entire time, and it's about applying it. But, the message seems to have gotten through, and gotten through in a humbling way. I think also that's one thing that I kind of noticed, is that he really seemed to take some things to heart, because he said there was a narrative about me not being a great teammate, him speaking as himself, and said, that's something he's trying to change, and because he's got this very quiet, very sort of hard-edged demeanor to him, kind of, set like, default setting, if you will. And he's sort of realizing that, like, on this team where everybody seems to be having a good time, he needs to adjust and be a part of that, and find a way to, not stand outside of that, and sort of mix in with it, rather than sort of being, out of it. I mean, I think, they like him, that you clearly see they jab him in this, it's a little cutting kind of way, like Miles Turner and Haliburton, when he won Rising Stars MVP, and, he said, that winning the team thing was the biggest thing. And they were like, Cap, it was like they're slang for lying. Like, there's no way you weren't happy to be MVP. And Ben's looking there like kind of stunned that they made that crack, and they were both cracking up. They were like, oh, come on, Ben, and he probably has to learn to play into that at least a little bit. But I mean, I think those kind of moments were a little bit, sort of, telling for him, that they were kind of a little bit of a shock. I think that he kind of realized that, okay, that's how they view me, and that I am a little bit too every once in a while about me. Like, they like his aggression, and Miles literally said so in the next breath. But that he does have to find a way to mix in with the grander whole, and he's figuring out what that really looks like.
Yeah, and I mean, the defense is an issue. That has to get better. On one hand, it's very easy to look at this last series against the Celtics and say, do they lose all three of those games if they had Mathurin? I don't. You got to think they're going to win at least one of them, maybe two of them. But maybe he gives away more on defense than he gets on offense. There's no guarantee he's going to be the piece that they need. You've got to be. Is Embiid going to be healthy? Is Giannis going to be healthy? There's a huge mountain to climb in the East, even if things go right for the Pacers. But I just think it's interesting that Mathurin could be the missing piece, and he's already on the roster, which is what you want.
Right.
We'll wrap up
with growth for Nembhard and Nesmith too. On top of those guys, I mean, as happy as they are with them, you saw the best version of Nembhard the last couple of games, and he had really good overall efficiency numbers, good shooting numbers. You obviously saw scenarios where he kind of disappeared offensively or was quiet offensively. Nesmith, I think they were just very happy with his defense, with just his general glue guy stuff. But you had some periods where he couldn't make any shots. He had a really good regular season shooting the ball, had a tough playoffs shooting the ball, and that's a big piece of who he is just being a really accurate outside shooter. So they still have room for growth too. I guess the small thing is that Mathurin could help them take an extra step. But if Mathurin doesn't work out, they're not, this obviously showed them they can move on without him. They can win without him. But, if they get the best version of him, that might be the best version of them.
Yeah, I mean, we even talked about it, I think, on the last podcast. That's the biggest, or maybe we talked about it offline, but the biggest issue it seemed like they had without Haliburton is where are the points coming from? But Nemar stepped up and gave them to him. So the last topic, we got all offseason to talk about a bunch of interesting things, but this is almost the most interesting one to me. Just I don't think it's certainly not the most important, but it's most interesting in the whole Obi Toppin restricted free agent versus finding minutes for Jarace Walker. I think there is absolutely a scenario as a restricted free agent, you got to overpay for a guy to get him away from the team because the team can match. I don't think that's going to happen with Obi Toppin. I certainly could be wrong. If you're listening, I hope I'm wrong because that would mean lots of money for you, and I would love to see it. But I can see a scenario in which you get Toppin back for 12, 14, 15 million, maybe hopefully on a couple of years. And I think you're nuts if you let him. And if you can get that, then you take it. Now that means Walker's probably not playing, but then you've got Toppin on an easily tradable contract. So if you think Walker is ready to step forward, then you can trade Toppin and you sort of have you get it all. I mean, what are they saying about Toppin's contract situation, and what are your thoughts on that whole topic?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Chad's being pretty quiet about it, but I mean, what he did say was, we'd be happy to continue that partnership. Basically, again, like playing it close to the vest, not saying we'd be happy to continue that partnership for X amount of dollars, but we're not willing to continue that partnership for this amount of dollars. And that's obviously where the rubber meets the road is if someone comes up and says, man, I really, really want a rim running big and I'm willing to pay $20 million a year for it. I presume if you're getting into those kinds of numbers, they're not going to match it. I don't think they have the money to match it. I mean, I don't know what their limit would be off the top of my head. I mean, like somewhere in the 10 to 15 range seems like it would be, per year would seem to be to meet to the wall for that. I'd be surprised if they'd go over 3 years. Maybe they go to 4.
I wouldn't think Toppin would want to go 4 years at that rate. I would think he'd want to be a free agent at some point. So.
Sure. And so, I feel like there is a modest but substantial contract that they're willing to give him. I think they want to find out. They like what they got out of him. I mean, frankly, it was everything they each could have asked for. For the most part, I think they obviously needed something better defensively. They obviously needed somebody that was going to be more of a true second scoring option, is what Pascal Siakam obviously became. But he gave them a weapon, and he, it allowed him to remind the league of why he was a top 10 pick in the first place, why he was player of the year at Dayton. I mean, there are some things that he does that are special. He has a handful of really special skills. His ability to run the floor for a guy as big as he is, his dexterity around the rim, not just dunking the basketball, but his ability to finish through contact, ability to just, basically good layup package, for lack of a better word. He's really good at using the backboard when he's around there, even if he's not throwing it down. He shot 70% from 2. I mean, that's just
he is the ultimate modern player in that he dunks and he shoots threes.
Yeah,
he's
exactly.
By TJ McConnell. That's that's the modern NBA player.
Precisely. And so, and with as much as they run, that's valuable. If you're always going to get in those circumstances and knowing, it feels like the easy part. And to some extent it is, but you still want to finish as many of those as you can. You still want to make sure that every time you're getting out and running like that, and you're getting on a fast break, and every time you're as much time as you can get in transition and get out to the point where you're the only one around the rim. And that's how fast Obi is so frequently he's the only guy there, and he doesn't have to worry about dealing with somebody when he gets there because he's outrun everybody to get a clean break. And it is a real weapon for the way they want to play. And so, that really stood out. And he shot the ball really well from 3. He was over 40% in the regular season. He hit some big ones in the playoffs as well. So, I mean, you saw him get better from 3-point range. He's still not a great defender, but I think you saw some improvement there. I think you saw improvement on the glass from him. And overall, he seemed to be just really enjoying himself. And the guy just seemed to have a blast. And
he was good in the playoffs. I mean, you never know can a guy play in the playoffs or not, but he was he was everything you could ask for as your big off the bench in the playoffs.
Yeah. I mean, you had some moments where it's like, he can't guard that guy,
right.
And maybe you shouldn't be on him. I mean, like Tatum got him in a spin move where you were just like, he basically was just like waiting for Obi to come up to him, and he just went left, and it spun left, and Obi had no chance. And there were some moments like that where you're like, oh boy, okay, like that's just not a guy that he can guard. But he brought enough resistance, enough size to be functional. And they had a lot of scenarios where they played Siakam and Toppin together with two four-ish type of guys playing, one of them playing the five. That allowed them a lot of, just a lot of lineup variability, a lot of lineup variety, a lot of just versatility, which helped. I think really helped. They didn't have to go to they got good minutes out of Isaiah Jackson. They didn't have to lean too hard on him. And again, like he had McConnell was 1 and Toppin was 2 in total points for bench guys in the NBA playoffs. So at least at this point, I mean, there's obviously more games left to be played, and somebody like Derek Lively, if he comes back healthy for the finals, has a chance to catch him. But those guys were, they were really, really good, top to bottom. Toppin was he was a really good addition. Obviously how that fits with Walker is interesting. I think they do see other opportunities to get Walker on the floor. They really think he can play more 3. They love that he can handle the ball at the top of the, that he can bring the ball up. He can operate as a point guard if you need him. They don't need him. They have a bunch of point guards, but it's still a valuable asset to have a guy like that can handle the basketball if you have to. And Chad Buchanan was still really happy with what he saw. Rick Carlisle had said great things. He's got to become the defender that he looks like he can be. He was a really good defender in college, but he only played 1 year of college basketball. You saw some immaturity there as far as him gambling too much. Just trying to poke the ball away from people. It's like he's got to be steadier. He's got to be a guy that can get down and defend 1 through 4. Hasn't proven he can be that guy yet, but he's got more defensive upside than Obi does. So it's going to be interesting to see how they make it work, but they do see the value in the asset, and they believe he can be a really good player.
It's just interesting to me that as good as Toppin was, Walker, the ideal, or not even the ideal, but if Walker's what he could be, then he's a better fit for this team just because of the defense, because you got Haliburton, because you got Mathurin on the roster. So it'll be real interesting to me to see how that plays out, and whether they believe in Walker. But I don't know that Walker. His shooting in the G League seemed to get significantly better, which is a huge thing. Whether that's simple and everything, and it's the G League, it's not the NBA. But if he's a 37% 3-point shooter who can play defense, that's probably a better fit than Toppin, as good as Toppin is. I mean, it's a great problem to have. So
yeah, no, it is. I mean, there's more development, but the shot got a lot better. I mean, the shot, the biggest clear development point, the thing that is dramatically better is the jump shot. It is so much better than it was. I mean, you saw really game-to-game progress from that. I mean, there was good fortune just having the Mad Ants in town, this year, just, for them, for me, just to be able to go check them out a couple times. I mean, I wasn't at every Mad Ants home game or anything like that, but there were a few occasions I got to go either the morning or another game, or, their playoff games. There was a couple scenarios where just go watch those guys and see Walker get heavy minutes, and even watch them when they were in the showcase in Las Vegas and him getting a lot of work there. You saw the real progress in the Mad Ants games of how much better of a shooter he became. And then he came out, it seemed like every time he got real minutes, he was hitting a 3, and so at least 1 or 2. So like the shooting range is really there, and that's come a long way. The handle's really there. The vision's really there. The biggest thing that has to, he has to become a really good rebounder, and he has to become a really good defender. And that's what was supposed to be there. And those skills have to really show up at a big league level for him to be, what they need him to be. But the ancillary pieces are forming, quite nicely.
I will end it right here. We've talked longer than we normally do, but it's a fascinating offseason for the Pacers team. Dustin will have plenty more from the exit interviews over the next several days at IndyStar.com. Free agency's coming up. Again, we talked about how they're not probably going to make a big move, but there are certainly moves to be made. Big outside move, I should say. Keeping Siakam would be a huge move. Toppin's obviously another very interesting one. So keep coming back to IndyStar for everything you need to know about the Pacers.